Hello, vinyl community. It is January 1st, 2021. I'll have to get used to saying that over the next few weeks, maybe months, who knows. Um, this is my first official video for the new year, hopefully the first of many that I'll be doing throughout this year. We'll see what happens. If I get the feedback and everything, I'll keep making them. I really enjoyed making my intro video just a few days back, and I appreciate everybody who took the time to watch that. Before I get started here, I'm going to be doing my best of 2020 album releases. Ironically, they're all, a lot of them are the old artists that I love. There are a couple of newer artists, but most are new albums or archival releases by some of the old guys that mean so much to me musically. First of all, I'd like to thank Matt Street, the Matt Street channel, for plugging my video just a couple of days ago. He put it on his community page, and I was fortunate to get a few of his subscribers over to my channel, so I hope I don't let you down with future videos. So welcome to the folks from the Matt Street channel. I know Tommy in North Carolina, he also gave me a little plug in his latest video. So I recommend you checking out his channel, Tommy's Musical Adventures. He's really neat. It's a lot of his discussions. He kind of adds some history to it. I know he did a blues tour just a few months back down in Mississippi that was really interesting to watch. And then Paul over at the Psycho's Platters channel gave me some nice comments, and I appreciate his support as well. So thank you to the three of you all for promoting my channel and giving me that positive feedback. I look forward to talking to you later on. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump into a few of the albums that I really enjoyed this year. I'm going to finish the video with a couple of honorable mentions. So I'll talk about those just briefly at the end. A couple albums that I either haven't listened to fully yet, but I'm aware of their significance. I'm just excited to talk about those. So in no particular order, let me just jump in here. The first is Mickey Dolan's Live in Japan. It was released by 7A Records overseas in the UK. This is a really neat release, and if you don't know anything about 7A Records, give them a look. They put a lot of solo Monkees release, different live things. They just put out a new Peter Tork reissue of his first and really only true solo album. I haven't listened to it yet. I ordered it. I got it just before Christmas. Then Christmas hit, and I haven't had a chance to plug it in and listen to it. I have listened to this one a few times. Mickey Live in Japan. The Monkees had just become really big. It was in the 80s. MTV came around. The Monkees show really kicked off, and they really loved it in Japan. And so they were, at least Mickey and Davey especially, were both really pushing their Monkees history in Japan. So they took advantage of the touring opportunities. I know Peter was working with the New Monks at the time. He was releasing some things with them. So this release really had a lot of Monkees hits, as well as some deeper cuts. Of course, he does Last Train to Clarksville, I'm a Believer, Mary Mary. It's also neat to hear him do some Monkey songs that were sung by Mike. He did Sunny Girlfriend. He did the Davy Jones song, I Want to Be Free, and a couple others like that. And he also finished up with a few of his solo hits at the time. And this release also came with a DVD, which I'll admit I have not watched yet, work and everything. There's some live shots of Mickey in Japan, so you get that visual as well as the CD. So this is really good. I recommend it over at 7A Records. Mickey Dolan's Live in Japan. Really good car listening music. The second is kind of a bittersweet album that I have. This is the latest James Taylor record, American Standard. It came out early this year. And a lot of people complain, about the older artists singing the standards. It's been done. Everybody's done it. Willie Nelson really started it back in the 70s with Stardust, and of course Rod Stewart had his big American Songbook catalog that he put out. Bob Dylan's done it. He did it 3 times over several discs. His last standard release was 3 discs of solo standard music, and this was really good. I mean, a lot of people were, saying, "Oh, it's been done so many times, the standards." But I've really enjoyed this. I really like listening to this kind of music. While I'm filming it here now, it's the perfect day to listen to it. It's foggy, it's rainy, kind of chilly outside. So if you heat up some coffee, listen to this. It's really a good listen. What's different about this one, and why it's melancholy to me, I'll get to in just a minute. He doesn't just stick to the Sinatra songs, the Gershwin tunes. He does a lot of musical numbers. He does like Surrey with a Fringe on Top, Old Man River, things like that. One of the really interesting songs off of this that was really the reason that I wanted to get into it. He did a song called "As Easy as Rolling Off a Log" that was featured in a very early Looney Tunes short called Catnip College, or something like that. That might not be the name of the actual cartoon. But that song always stuck out to him, and there was never really a true release of it in over almost 80 years. So he did it and really put his all into it. Actually, the video has clips of the cartoon with James singing over it. But why this album is kind of bittersweet is because this was the free album that was given out for ticket purchases of the James Taylor Jackson Browne tour that was supposed to happen in summer of 2020. It sold out very quickly where I live. I was fortunate to have got my hands on a ticket, thanks to my sister, a birthday present. So her, my mom, and myself were going to go see James Taylor and Jackson Browne. Of course, the year shut itself down. So it's been rescheduled for this coming June. I'm not thinking it's too likely I'm going to see it. But if I'm never able to see him, I was able to get this little reminder of what I could have heard at the concert, hearing James do some of the standards. So that's a really good one. James Taylor American Standard. It was a really good piece to buy. All right, the next one, I mentioned this group on my first video, and it happened just to be the same album that I showed earlier. The Wood Brothers, the Kingdom in My Mind. I was speaking of one of their earlier records. This was really good. The Wood Brothers, if you don't know anything about them, I highly recommend checking them out. If you like the music of like the band that toured with Bob Dylan, if you like Americana music, it's just really good. Three-piece music, percussion, really, really nice bass grooves by Chris Wood. He's a jazz bassist, playing a little, funk, rock and roll, and then the singing and guitar talents of his brother Oliver Wood. I saw the Wood Brothers back in November of 2019, and it was actually the last show that I saw before everything shut down. So that was the official, final concert that I saw before everything shut down, and it was a good one to keep in the back of my mind to keep to keep hope that I'm going to see another concert soon. But this is good. I mean, really anything by the Wood Brothers is good. They've come into their own in their last 3 or 4 albums. This one has really good funky basses, bass lines. The percussion is excellent. It was actually an album born out of their jamming in the studio with one another, which is how they, just play around, and they've never actually tried that as a writing style. So they went into the studio and jammed, and a lot of these are based around those jams that they had in the studio. So Kingdom in My Mind, the Wood Brothers, excellent 2020 album. All right, another album that came out, if you want to call it an album, I call it an album, is the Avett Brothers. The Third Gleam is how it's properly said. This was a kind of a surprise release. They just released another album, um, kind of mid 2019. So the fact that we got this a little bit less than a year after that one was really special. I'm going to do probably a series of videos, or maybe just one video about their Gleam series coming up soon. Essentially, what it is it's just but when they record with a full band, especially their newer albums. But when they started out, it was just the three. It was just the two brothers, Scott and Seth Avett, and their friend and bassist Bob Crawford. And their live shows, especially early on, are really known for their almost heavy metal kind of energy. I'm just strumming the guitars super fast. Some of it a little bit of screaming at the audience. All in good fun. Just wide open. Just a kind of a grungy folk style, but they've really morphed into being very melodic and very worried about what their songs sound like, what the words are saying, what the music sounds like. And so the third Gleam is Scott and Seth. So basically, what the Gleams do, it just gets Scott and Seth back into the studio, just the two of them, for the previous two installments of this series. This one they actually had Bob, their bassist, play on a couple of tracks, but they just play acoustically. There's not really any frills on it. Just really beautiful, soft music, but it still packs its own little punch. The reason I say it's a full album is that the other two installments of the Gleam only had 6 songs, and they were marketed as EPs, extended plays. This one has 8 songs and really has the running time of a shorter full length album. So I consider it an album. It really got me through some times this year that I was a little less doubtful in the year and everything, but this really had some really sweet melodies, and I recommend it. So the third Gleam by the Avett Brothers. The last regular album that I would put into my list is Bob Dylan's Rough and Rowdy Ways. And this was really a surprise to, I think, all Bob Dylan fans. Earlier in the pandemic, I want to say it was in April, things were already bleak at that time, and all of a sudden we were surprised at midnight one night to hear this 17-minute track called Murder Most Foul, originally the first part of it's about the JFK assassination, but it really kind of picks up into its own beast, and that it's 17 minutes of Kennedy history, and then just Bob talking about his favorite music and kind of summoning the aura of Wolfman Jack, the old DJ from Bob Dylan's coming up years, and he just rattles off a bunch of different artists, a bunch of different songs. He's got some strange references to some people that you wouldn't expect Dylan to make reference to. But it was just a shock to hear 17 minutes of new Bob when we haven't heard any original music from him since 2012. Like I said earlier, he had those Sinatra standard albums that came out in that period, but we hadn't heard anything original by him in 8 years. And then shortly after that, about 3 weeks later, we heard another song called "I Contain Multitudes," which is the opening of this album. And this album isn't necessarily a melodic album as much as it is almost like beat poetry, and just Dylan kind of the soft band, bowed basses behind him, steel guitars. It's really a fascinating listen, and actually he almost markets Murder Most Foul as its own piece, because this is, ironically, as thin as it is, a 2-disc album. So just the 17-minute Murder Most Foul is on disc 2, almost to listen to it as its own entity, and it's even packages that on his case. So that's Rough and Rowdy Ways. Get it if you haven't gotten it. If you like Dylan, get it. If you like just nice words, get it. Lastly, I'm not going to talk too much longer. I know I've already rattled off a bunch, but this was the Tom Petty, Wildflowers, and All the Rest box set that came out. And I'm a Petty sucker, so I got the the larger box with a bunch of the frills in it, and there were other videos that you can see what's inside of it. Um, but it has the original Wildflowers album. It's got the all the rest. So what happened is um, Petty recorded a bunch of songs for Wildflowers, and a lot of people still consider it his masterpiece, even though for a lot of artists it was a mid-career point. Um, and he always wanted to release it as a double disc. The record company wouldn't do it, so he had to shelve a bunch of songs and just release it as a single disc, and it still clocked in at over an hour. So for years, even into his last year in 2017, he was wanting to put together a box set that he felt proud of. He wanted to tour the Wildflowers album, sing it start to finish, including the tracks that were originally shelved. So this box set includes the original album. It's not remastered. It's just the original, like you have it already in your collection. Then the All the Rest, which is another 10 songs, some of which were released on later compilations and albums, but there were some, unreleased tracks. There's a third disc of home recordings that he did, which are beautiful in themselves. Some live tracks of almost the whole album live over his whole career from when he recorded this in the 90s up until his last tour. And then the last disc is called Finding Wildflowers, which is a lot of demos and varying versions of Wildflowers. Just shows that how his creative juices kicked in. So those are my top albums for 2020.